Welcome back to Random History. I'm your navigator as we explore the little known events and people that make history such an amazing subject. The events I delve into are probably not ones you learned about in school. These are the ones that when you do hear about them, you're likely to think that they could not possibly be real. But they are. The Ghosts of Pearl Harbor. Today is a special edition episode of Random History as we mourn the 83rd anniversary of The Day That Lives in Infamy. At 7:55 a.m., 7 December 1941, the United States received an extremely harsh wake-up call as the Japanese bombed the Pacific Fleet in their home port of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack was the result of several factors whose interactions led to the death of over 2,400 people, nearly half of whom were on the USS Arizona alone. The bombing of Pearl Harbor dragged the U.S. into World War II, where nearly 500,000 Americans were killed. While the lack of faith in new technologies, specifically radar, the lining up of all aircraft in neat rows on the tarmacs of Hickam, Ford Island, Wheeler Army Base, and Kaneohe, instead of a more tactical dispersal of the aircraft, showed a lack of strategic planning or tactical preparedness, if not gross incompetence by base leadership. This may have contributed to some of the deaths and destruction of the attack. Also, the lack of tactical awareness on the part of the Japanese, not knowing where the American aircraft carriers were and fearing a counterattack from them, kept the Japanese from bombing our oil storage facilities that contained all the fuel we had in the Pacific. This kept the attack from becoming much worse than it was. In the midst of the chaos of the attack, some Americans fought back. For today's True Hero segment, I'm going to discuss a few of these heroes, men that risked their lives to save their brothers in arms. One paid the ultimate price as he tried to rescue his shipmates from the capsizing USS Oklahoma. Another defied orders to abandon ship, rescuing the captain and taking a machine gun to shoot at the attacking enemy aircraft. A third took flight in an outdated, underarmed aircraft, wearing nothing but his pajamas, combat boots, and his sidearm. These are the types of people we need to celebrate and emulate. Pearl Harbor is one of the most significant sites in American history, primarily known for the Japanese surprise attack on 7 December 1941, which led to the U.S. entry into World War II. This devastating attack resulted in the deaths of over 2,400 Americans and left an indelible mark on the nation's collective memory. Given the tragedy and extreme loss of life, it's no surprise that Pearl Harbor is also considered one of the most haunted locations in the United States. Over the years, numerous accounts of ghostly encounters have been reported, making Pearl Harbor a place not only of historical significance, but also paranormal intrigue. Today I explore the ghost stories and hauntings associated with Pearl Harbor, examining the possible origins of these spirits and the experiences of those who have encountered them. To understand the hauntings of Pearl Harbor, it's essential to briefly recount the events of 7 December 1941. On that fateful Sunday morning, the Imperial Japanese Navy launched a surprise military strike against the United States Naval Base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack lasted just under 2 hours, but was devastatingly effective, sinking 4 battleships, damaging 4 others, and destroying nearly 200 aircraft. The human toll was immense, with 2,403 Americans killed and 1,178 wounded. The USS Arizona, one of the battleships sunk during the attack, suffered the greatest loss of life, with over 1,100 sailors and Marines killed. The ship still rests on the harbor seabed, and a memorial was built over it to honor those who perished. The USS Utah and the USS Oklahoma also experienced significant casualties, with many crew members trapped inside the sinking vessels. The scale of the tragedy, combined with the suddenness and violence of the attack, has led many to believe that the spirits of those who died on that day have not found peace and continue to linger at Pearl Harbor. The USS Arizona Memorial is one of the most visited sites at Pearl Harbor, and it is also one of the most haunted. The ship's wreckage still contains the remains of many of the sailors who died during the attack, and it's believed that the spirits are still present. Numerous visitors to the memorial have reported seeing apparitions of sailors dressed in World War II-era uniforms. These ghostly figures are often seen standing on the deck of the sunken battleship or walking along the memorial's white structure. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the Arizona involves a visitor who saw a group of men standing at attention on the deck of the ship. The visitor initially thought it was a reenactment or some sort of display, but as he watched, the figures slowly faded away. Upon inquiring with the staff, he was told that no such reenactment was taking place, and that he had likely seen the spirits of the sailors who died in the attack. In addition to the apparitions, there have been numerous reports of visitors feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair while at the memorial. Some have described a feeling as though they were being watched or even touched by unseen hands. These experiences are often accompanied by unexplained cold spots, despite the warm Hawaiian climate. The sense of loss and tragedy that permeates the site is palpable, and it's not uncommon for visitors to be moved to tears, even those who have no personal connection with the events of 7 December. My boys and I visited the memorial a few summers ago, and I can tell you that the stillness and intensity of the site is truly remarkable. Seeing the wall with the names of those that perished is extremely moving. Ford Island, located in the middle of Pearl Harbor, was one of the primary targets during the Japanese attack. It was the home to several battleships, including the Arizona and Utah, and was also the location of an airstrip. The island saw heavy fighting and significant casualties during the attack. It is also another area where paranormal activity has been reported. One of the most well-known ghost stories from Ford Island involves a young Navy wife who was living on the island at the time of the attack. According to legend, she was killed during the bombing, and her spirit has been wandering the island ever since. She is often described as a woman in a white dress and is usually seen near the officers' quarters. Those who have encountered her describe her as appearing sad and lost, as if she is searching for something or someone. Another commonly reported apparition on Ford Island is that of a group of soldiers marching in formation. These ghostly figures are often seen near the airstrip, and witnesses have described hearing the sound of marching boots and military orders being shouted, even though no one is there. Some believe that these are the spirits of the soldiers who died during the attack, still carrying out their duties in the afterlife. Battleship Row is the name given to the line of battleships moored along Ford Island during the attack. In addition to the Arizona, the USS Oklahoma and USS West Virginia also suffered heavy casualties. The Oklahoma was hit by as many as 8 torpedoes, causing it to capsize, trapping hundreds of sailors inside. Rescue efforts were able to save some, but many perished in the dark, cold waters. The USS Oklahoma Memorial, located on Ford Island, honors the 429 sailors and Marines who died when the ship capsized. Visitors to the memorial have reported seeing shadowy figures near the memorial and hearing the faint sounds of banging as if someone is trying to escape from the ship. Some have even reported hearing voices calling for help. These experiences are believed to be the residual energy of those who died trapped in the ship. The West Virginia, another battleship, was heavily damaged during the attack. It is also associated with ghostly activity. Sailors who have served on the ship, after it was raised and repaired, have reported strange occurrences: doors opening and closing by themselves, and lights turning on and off, as well as the sound of footsteps in empty corridors. Some believe that these are the spirits of the sailors who died during the attack, still carrying out their duties, even in death. Hickam Field, now known as Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, was the primary airfield targeted during the attack. The bombing of Hickam resulted in the deaths of 189 people and the destruction of numerous aircraft. The site has a long history of paranormal activity, with reports of ghostly sightings dating back to the years immediately following the attack. One of the most famous ghost stories from Hickam Field involves a pilot who was killed during the attack. According to the story, his spirit has been seen walking along the runway dressed in his flight gear. Witnesses have described seeing the figure of a man walking with a limp as if he is injured. The ghost is often seen at night, and those who have encountered him say that he disappears when approached. Another commonly reported phenomenon at Hickam Field is the sound of planes taking off and landing, even when no aircraft are present. These phantom sounds are often accompanied by the smell of burning oil and the sensation of heat, similar to what would have been experienced during the attack. Some believe these are residual hauntings, a type of paranormal activity where the energy of a traumatic event is imprinted on the environment and replays itself over and over. The barracks at Hickam Field, where many soldiers were killed during the attack, are also said to be haunted. Soldiers who have been stationed at Hickam have reported hearing strange noises in the barracks, such as footsteps, door slamming, and the sound of furniture being moved. Some have also reported seeing apparitions of soldiers in World War II-era uniforms, particularly in the older section of the barracks. One chilling story involves a soldier who was on night duty in one of the barracks. He reported seeing a man in a blood-stained uniform standing in the hallway. The soldier called out to the man, but he did not respond. When the soldier approached, the figure disappeared. The incident left the soldier shaken, and he later learned that the area where he had seen the apparition was where several soldiers had been killed during the attack. The sense of unease that pervades the barracks has been reported by many who have spent time there. Some soldiers have described feeling as though they are being watched, while others have reported waking up in the middle of the night to find their belongings have been moved or their beds shaken. The barracks, like much of Pearl Harbor, seems to be a place where the past is very much present. The USS Bowfin, a World War II submarine that earned the nickname the Pearl Harbor Avenger for its service in the Pacific, is now a museum located at Pearl Harbor. The submarine is another site of reported paranormal activity, with visitors and staff alike experiencing strange occurrences. One of the most commonly reported experiences on the Bowfin is the feeling of being watched or followed while inside the submarine. Some visitors have described hearing footsteps behind them, only to turn around and find nobody there. Others have reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the narrow corridors of the submarine. In addition to these eerie sensations, there have been reports of doors opening and closing by themselves, tools and equipment being moved, and the sound of voices coming from empty rooms. Some believe that these experiences are the results of the spirits of the crew members who served on the Bowfin during the war, still carrying out their duties, even in death. The USS Missouri, also known as the Mighty Mo, is another battleship with strong connections to Pearl Harbor. Although it was not present during the attack, it later became the site of the Japanese surrender, marking the end of World War II. The ship now serves as a museum and is moored near the USS Arizona Memorial, symbolically standing guard over the site where the war began. The Mighty Mo is also said to be haunted, with numerous reports of ghostly activity on board. One of the famous stories involves a tour guide who is leading a group through the ship when he noticed a man in a Navy uniform standing at attention. The guide thought the man was part of a reenactment, but when he looked again, the figure had vanished. Other reports include sounds of footsteps echoing through the empty ship, doors slamming shut on their own, and the sight of shadowy figures in the ship's passageways. Some believe that the spirits of sailors who served on the USS Missouri during the war still linger on the ship, perhaps drawn to its historical significance. There are several theories as to why Pearl Harbor is so haunted. One explanation is the concept of a residual haunting, where the energy from a traumatic event is imprinted on the location, causing the event to replay itself like a recording. The intense emotions and sudden violence of the attack on Pearl Harbor may have created such imprints, leading to these ghostly phenomena that have been reported. Another theory is that the spirits of those who died in the attack were unable to move on due to the sudden and violent nature of their deaths. In many cultures, it is believed that the spirits who die in such circumstances are more likely to remain earthbound, unable to find peace. The sheer number of lives lost in such a short period may have created a concentration of spiritual energy at Pearl Harbor, leading to these numerous reports of ghostly encounters. Finally, some believe that the hauntings at Pearl Harbor are a form of crisis apparition, where the spirits of those who died suddenly return to the place of their death. These spirits may be seeking closure or attempting to communicate with the living, leading to the sightings and experiences reported by visitors and staff. Pearl Harbor is a place of profound historical significance, forever marked by the events of 7 December 1941. It is also a place where the past seems to linger in a very real way, with numerous reports of ghostly encounters and paranormal activity. From the USS Arizona Memorial to the haunted barracks of Hickam Field, the spirits of those who died on the attack appear to still be present, perhaps unable to find peace after such a violent and sudden end. Whether these hauntings are the result of residual energy, earthbound spirits, or some other phenomenon, they serve as a reminder of the tragedy that occurred at Pearl Harbor and the lives that were lost. For those who visit these haunted sites, the experience can be both eerie and moving, offering a glimpse into the past that is not as distant as it might seem. The ghosts of Pearl Harbor continue to haunt the living, keeping the memory of that fateful day alive for future generations. As I said in the introduction, many of those at Pearl Harbor on 7 December 1941, although caught completely by surprise, fought back. For today's hero, I will recount 3 of these stories. The first of these stories is of John Charles England. J.C. England was a young American sailor whose bravery during the attack on Pearl Harbor on 7 December 1941 has become a symbol of selflessness and sacrifice. At just 20 years old, England was serving aboard the USS Oklahoma, a battleship that was one of the first vessels struck during the Japanese surprise attack. His heroic actions during those crucial moments earned him a place in history, and his legacy is remembered with great honor. J.C. England was born on 11 December 1920 in Harris, Missouri. He grew up in Alhambra, California, where he excelled in both academics and athletics. After graduating from Alhambra High School, England joined the U.S. Navy in 1939, driven by a sense of duty and patriotism. By 1941, he had risen to the rank of ensign, serving aboard the USS Oklahoma as a communications officer. On the morning of 7 December, England was stationed on the Oklahoma, moored on Battleship Row in Pearl Harbor. The Oklahoma was among the first ships to be hit during the Japanese attack. Within minutes, the battleship was struck by multiple torpedoes, causing it to capsize rapidly. The attack left the Oklahoma in chaos, trapping hundreds of men inside the overturned hull. Despite overwhelming danger, England immediately sprang into action. As the ship began to list and capsize, he made his way through the confusion and destruction to help evacuate his fellow sailors. He guided many of them out of the ship, ensuring that they reached safety. However, England's heroism didn't end there. After helping several sailors escape, England returned to the ship multiple times to rescue more men trapped inside, each time risking his own life to save others, demonstrating extraordinary courage and selflessness. On his final trip back into the ship, England was unable to make it back out. He perished along with over 400 other sailors and Marines trapped inside the USS Oklahoma. England's actions that day were a testament to his bravery and dedication to his fellow sailors. His willingness to repeatedly enter the sinking ship, fully aware of the risk, exemplifies the highest ideals of military service and personal sacrifice. For his extraordinary heroism during the attack on Pearl Harbor, J.C. England was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart. His story became an inspiration to many, symbolizing the courage and selflessness of the sailors who fought and died that day. In honor of his sacrifice, the U.S. Navy named a destroyer escort, the USS England, after him in 1943. The USS England served with distinction during World War II, particularly in anti-submarine warfare, and was later credited with sinking 6 Japanese submarines in just 12 days, a record achievement in naval history. England's legacy is also commemorated at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu, where his name is inscribed on the walls of the missing. His actions at Pearl Harbor serve as a powerful reminder of the bravery exhibited by so many on that tragic day. J.C. England's story is one of selflessness, heroism, embodying the spirit of those who gave their lives in defense of their country. The second hero for today is a man that defied orders to abandon ship and save his own life in order to save his captain and many others aboard his ship, the USS West Virginia. Dory Miller was an African-American sailor who displayed extraordinary courage during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on 7 December. As one of the first black heroes of World War II, Miller's bravery brought attention to the injustices of segregation in the U.S. military and inspired many to advocate for racial equality in the armed forces. Miller was born in Waco, Texas in 1919, and he enlisted in the Navy 20 years later. At the time, African Americans were primarily assigned to menial roles in the military due to segregation policies. Most black sailors served as mess attendants, tasked with cooking and cleaning. Miller was assigned to the USS West Virginia, a battleship stationed at Pearl Harbor. When Japanese forces attacked, he had been performing his regular duties as messman, and he rushed to help on deck as explosions rocked the harbor. When Miller arrived on deck, he saw his captain, Mervyn Benyon, who had been severely injured by shrapnel. Miller dragged Benyon to a safer location and continued to assist in rescuing wounded crew members, evacuating them as the ship was attacked by torpedoes and bombs. In the chaos, Miller, who had no prior training with firearms, manned an unmanned .50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun and began firing at the incoming planes. He continued shooting until he had ran out of ammunition, reportedly downing multiple Japanese aircraft in the process. Although the exact number remains unknown, we know that he shot down at least 2 Japanese aircraft. The actions of Doris Miller not only demonstrated his bravery under fire, but also challenged racial stereotypes. In the 1940s, black servicemen were rarely acknowledged for their valor. Yet, Miller's heroism was recognized across the United States. His bravery became a rallying point for civil rights activists, highlighting both the sacrifices black Americans were making for their country and the contradictions of fighting for freedom abroad while being denied full rights at home. On 27 May 1942, Miller became the first African American to receive the Navy Cross, awarded by Admiral Chester Nimitz, who praised his extraordinary courage and disregard for his own personal safety. After Pearl Harbor, Miller continued to serve in the Navy, later joining the USS Liscome Bay. Tragically, on 24 November 1943, the ship was torpedoed near the Gilbert Islands, and Miller among the nearly 650 men who perished. His body was never recovered, but his legacy lives on. His courage has been commemorated in numerous memorials, schools, and streets named in his honor, and he remains a symbol of resilience and bravery. Miller's actions during Pearl Harbor served as a significant catalyst for greater recognition of black soldiers' contributions during World War II. His bravery not only helped to inspire the eventual desegregation of the armed forces in 1948, but it also serves as a powerful testament to the strength and determination of those who fought against enemy forces, threatening our way of life. Doris Miller's legacy endures, a reminder of how courage and duty can break through even the strongest of barriers. Our final hero today was a fighter pilot stationed at Hickam Field. He, like many of the pilots, were out the night before celebrating at the officers' club. The attack quickly woke him, and he immediately ran to join the fight. Phil Rasmussen, famously known as the Pajama Pilot, became a symbol of courage and quick thinking during the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th. As one of the few American pilots to take to the skies that fateful morning, Rasmussen's actions became legendary, not just for his bravery, but also for the unusual circumstances under which he fought. On the morning of 7 December 1941, Second Lieutenant Phil Rasmussen was a 23-year-old pilot stationed at Wheeler Army Airfield in Hawaii. Like many others on that Sunday morning, Rasmussen was still in bed when the attack began. The first wave of Japanese bombers and fighters struck Pearl Harbor at approximately 7:55 a.m., targeting American battleships, airfields, and other military installations. The assault was sudden and devastating, catching the U.S. military completely off guard. Rasmussen awoke to the sound of explosions and the sight of enemy aircraft strafing the airfield. Without hesitation, he leaped out of bed, still wearing his purple pajamas, and he ran to the nearest aircraft. Despite the chaos unfolding around him, Rasmussen managed to find a P-36 Hawk fighter plane that was still operational, one of the few that had not been destroyed or damaged by the initial attack. I need to pause here and mention that the commander of the Army Air Corps was afraid that saboteurs would damage the aircraft. So instead of having them dispersed around the airfield, he decided to have them all neatly lined up across the middle of the airfield where they could be easily guarded from a ground attack. That did not work out so well when the attack came from the air. Without the time to don his uniform, Rasmussen quickly climbed into the cockpit, still in his pajamas, and took off. He quickly joined 3 other pilots in the air, all of whom were equally unprepared for battle. Despite being vastly outnumbered by Japanese forces, Rasmussen and his fellow pilots were determined to fight back. Once airborne, Rasmussen found himself in the midst of one of the first dogfights over Pearl Harbor. The Japanese Zeros were far more advanced and numerous than the outdated P-36 Hawks that Rasmussen and his comrades were flying. Nevertheless, Rasmussen managed to shoot down a Japanese aircraft, an incredible feat given the circumstances. His plane was heavily damaged during the dogfight, with one account noting that it was hit by at least 500 bullets. Despite this, Rasmussen skillfully maneuvered his crippled aircraft back to Wheeler Field, where he made a successful landing. His actions that day made him one of the few American pilots to engage the enemy during the initial attack on Pearl Harbor. Phil Rasmussen's bravery and quick thinking during the attack on Pearl Harbor earned him a place in history. He later continued to serve with distinction throughout World War II, flying missions in the Pacific Theater. Rasmussen's story is often cited as an example of the determination and resilience of the American forces during one of the darkest days in U.S. history. Rasmussen's actions on December 7th remain a powerful reminder of the courage exhibited by those who faced overwhelming odds. The image of him taking off in just his pajamas, combat boots, and his .45, determined to defend his country despite the dire consequences, has become an iconic part of Pearl Harbor's legacy. This brings us to the end of another episode of Random History. I hope you enjoyed it and will come back and listen to future episodes. If you would like to view the transcript or sources for this episode, click on the link in the description. You can also make suggestions for future topics by clicking that same link. Until next time, make some history of your own. Navigator out.